designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
And welcome back. I am Dr. Don Allen. This is the show all about relationships, looking towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. So we have a good week. I'm excited. For a lot of you, it's Passover. For a lot of the other ones, it's Easter is coming up. A lot of people, too, what they're doing is going to do traditional relationship check-ins with their families and have special meals and hunt eggs and all of the wonderful things that can go along with this time of year. So just living vicariously through all the joy of what you all are doing. And I just think it's great. I love the energy this time of year. So I had to think about that. Usually what I would do on a day of special meaning kind of holiday is do one more on tradition and intentional family. But I decided to do this one today. Today's exciting title is Humility, the secret strength behind great relationships. Okay, so humility, the secret strength behind great relationships. And this one's kind of an interesting one for us because what I'm inviting you to do before we even get going is to slow yourself down. Again, this isn't about anything like accusations or negativity. It's not. It's about us doing a check-in with ourselves for the purpose of making ourselves better and the people around us that we love more connected. So that's why I chose this one today. It's always a good one around this time of year anyway, to humble yourself. And we're gonna talk about what those definitions are, but I'm going to give you some real practical information that can really help you slow down and do a check-in with yourself. I notice a lot of times really high-end CEOs of major companies, hire people, and they really look at that self-inquiry. How am I? How am I seen by others? What am I doing well? What do I need to avoid? All of those kind of things are very good practices in business, but what we're going to talk about is the relationship of our loved ones and our close friends and relatives that we care about and we want to do the best. So, this is what we're going to talk about. What goes into successful relationship, what goes into undermining relationships. And sometimes I'll talk about what destroys relationships, the good, the bad, and the ugly of things. So my hope is that we're interactive. I hope that you watch this show and you give me feedback and you let me know your questions, let me know what shows might be really interesting for you. It all goes into my planning. Right now, my big planning is to get some guest speakers on our show to talk about some of the more interesting topics in depth with other people in the world and the community. So we're going to do that. First thing I always like to do to start is to get us kind of percolating, to think about, what's he talking about today and what do I need to be thinking about as he goes through his show? So first thing I like to do is to ask you questions. So first one is, what if the very things that helped you succeed? What are the very things that helped you succeed in life are the same things that are now quietly hurting you? Isn't that an interesting thing? I wonder. Has your success ever made you a little less patient when things don't go your way? Right? And that could be from anything from talking to somebody or getting slowed down on the interstate, right? So those kind of things. What happens inside you when somebody else sees things differently than you do? This is kind of in the air with a lot of the issues we're having in terms of worldly concerns or politics or all of the sorts of things. Could be religion, could be just family. We're going to go see family, right? So when things don't go our way or when people see things differently than we do, kind of where do we go? right? What happens inside of us? Um, when that happens, do you get curious, like I just said, or do you get annoyed? Do you get impatient with people? So, next question: is humility weakness, or is it actually the strongest move that you can make in your relationship? And hopefully by the end of the show, you'll be saying, wait a minute, humility really does help me and it helps the people I love. Okay. I like this one. If someone followed you around for a week, would they say you're easy to influence? Or would they say, you're pretty close-minded, pretty set in your ways? And again, if I push you, do you get annoyed? Right? I don't know. You got to think about that one. Um, is it harder for you to admit you're wrong, or is it easier just to stay disconnected with people than admit you're wrong? Interesting. Interesting. Do you have a regular way to check your pride meter or your ego meter, not only for yourself, but also with trusted others? Can you ask people to give you good constructive criticism about how they're seeing you or how other people see you? Like I said, back to the beginning of my show, these things aren't necessarily fun for us to do. We don't often like to see what we do wrong. We're more content with being happy with what we've done right. Okay. So the last one I'll give you for just a thought before we start is, when you argue, are you trying to understand your partner, or are you trying to win? Get your way, usual stuff, right? So it's really interesting. This does kind of dovetail some of society. Remember, my basic premise was it true 2,000 years ago? Will it be true 2,000 years from now? I like history quite a bit. And it's just really interesting to kind of look at that or read kind of old history and look at what it says. I'm just about to finish my book on it's called Summa Theologica. It's by Thomas Aquinas. I'm just about to finish it. That thing was written in like the 12th century. I'm kind of leaning towards reading St. Augustine next, and that's like 200 AD or something like that. But it's interesting because nothing is new under the sun. And, back to, how pride hurts us and what that means by pride. What even is pride? Right. So we're going to have fun today. We're going to really enjoy this stuff. Remember, like I said, this is education. It's not psychotherapy. This is giving you news, hopefully, that will benefit your lives and the lives of people you love. But remember, I've already said it a couple times, always seek to understand before you seek to fix. And part of the problem when you're not humble or you don't have humility is you probably seek to give other people your opinion. So, yeah, we're going to have fun with it. So, in my discussion section, okay, so what did I do? I went back and looked at some of the old adages that are, actually on the books out there. So, one of the things that Socrates says, how's that for going back in time? The only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. And, it is interesting, because a lot of us, we become very, very skilled at what we're able to do and what we're able to accomplish, and the wisdom and the knowledge that we've acquired to do that. But that doesn't mean we know everything. And that doesn't mean we're good at everything. And I think sometimes that can happen. Remember what I said earlier, in that whole idea that, can we really look at something and humble ourselves to know what we know and know what we don't know? Right? Or do we just feel like because we succeeded in life, we have that kind of wisdom? I remember when I studied a long time ago, so don't hold me completely to this, but the Puritan faith, the idea back then is that if you were doing well, it's because God shined on you and liked you. So it was your obligation to tell people that weren't being successful how to be successful. Right? Well, because I'm successful, that means I know how to tell somebody else how to do it, is probably not a good way to go. Right? It probably isn't, but it was kind of a wisdom maybe way back when with that time. Right? So humility kind of begins when we begin to really realize I don't know something about something about that. Right? Confucius says real knowledge is to know the extent of one's own ignorance. Right? Now, ignorance means you don't know something. Stupidity means you know something, but you do it wrong anyway. So knowing what we don't know, right? We always want to start with that. Scientists and stuff, they always start with what is known, what is not known. right? So how do we figure that out, right? Those are some of the things. C.S. Lewis, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. It's back to that ego food. How is it for me? We'll talk about how society has kind of promoted that, and that's a trend. Like I said, I like to stay with classics, but we'll play with it, I guess. Rick Warren says humility is not denying your strengths, it's being honest about your weaknesses. And this is an interesting thing because one of the things that I like with humility is that just because I was good at something doesn't mean I'm good at it now. Long time ago, I've said on my show, I used to run marathons. I can't run at all now. At 68, my knees, I can do a lot of activities. I can, stay very active with my body, but I can't run stairs and I can't run. I can run with tennis, but just no more than like 80 steps at a time. So, it's humbling to think that I can't run. And it kind of is a downer. But, to stay healthy for longer and to be active for longer, I have to accept that humility, right? So, knowing my weaknesses and being honest. I always talk about the Gottman Institute. That's the main place that I go for, understanding how to help people in my practice. And John and Julie Gottman, says, and this is somewhat paraphrased, but accepting influence from your partner is one of the strongest predictors of relationship success. I know we've talked about accepting influence on a past show, but that's a really interesting thing to stop, look at your partner, and really say, how do you see this? I really want to know your opinion. I want to know your point of view. And when you do that, you're humbling yourself, not only that you don't know, but you also really care about their wisdom, their truth, how they see it, right? Subjective reality. You're both right. How do you see it? And a lot of times what's happening in that time is that they're filtering it through all of their collective wisdom, but also their state. They're very different than you are. They're very different than I am. When I look at my parents when I was a kid, they had wisdom. And when I looked at my parents as I got to be a grown person, they were having a lot of wisdom, but they were also having that wisdom through an aging body. So, what wisdom did aging give them? Well, I need to know that because genetically I'm kind of going down the same path they are. But if I'm not humble, I don't need to listen to somebody that's older and they aren't where I am and they don't understand the world where I am. And you see where that starts to drift us away, not only from human connection, but from the wisdom we need to have and store. Very, very important stuff. Okay, so both people have to be open for influence in a relationship. I looked this up. This is an adage my dad gave me when I was a kid, and I've always remembered it. So I tried to look at that up. So I like to go to AI, and AI will help me with things. And AI said in this one is that it couldn't find an exact quote from it. It basically said this is an old Arab proverb or a Sufi saying. Sufi mystics, right? But I like this one. It's he who knows and knows he knows is wise. Follow him. So he who knows and he knows that he knows, follow him. He who knows and knows not he knows, what you want to do with that is you want to teach them, right? Right? They don't know, but they know that. So they're seeking wisdom. You can impart wisdom on them. They can accept influence. I hope you heard that. Next, he who knows not and knows not he knows not, that's where you teach them. This is a person who really is not aware of it. The second one, he who knows and knows not he knows, that's where you encourage him. Wait a minute, you've got the skill set, keep practicing, keep doing those types of things you encourage. But this particular person knows not and knows that, right? You can teach him. But the last one is he who knows not and knows not that he knows not. Well, the proverb says, shun that person, they're a fool. So they don't know what they don't know, but they boldly go on to give you all this wisdom and impart all this knowledge. Well, they don't know what they don't know. I think in life, we can really see a lot of that. people that are really just confident, and you look and say, well, you're not aware that, of all the things that you really need to know for that. So let's say I don't know, and I don't know, and I want to fix your sink. I don't think that's going to go well, right? So that's what that means. So what we want to do is we don't want to get so emboldened with our own abilities when we don't have them, and then act boldly about it, because again, you're headed for disaster. Gottman Institute, again, 69% of relationship problems are perpetual. Okay, we know that about relationships. So we know that 69% of the things that we argue about or we're going to collide with, they're just things that are different between you and the person you love. You add that to the fact that people are only about 25% efficient and effective at communication. Communication mishaps are bound to happen. We know that. So what has to happen is we need to look at being open to understanding, to increase our knowledge of what each other's saying. We need to see that flexibility. And that's just so important. So humility allows that flexibility. Okay. That's really, really important. So when we come back, we're going to take some questions from the mailbag, and I might give you a couple more things before we go to that. But let's go to commercial. Looking forward to seeing you when we get back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And okay, we're back. About to go to the mailbag and answer some questions. Before I do, I was just looking through my notes. One thing I'll say before I go on is, we sometimes hear the word spoiled, right? Oh, somebody's spoiled. And, when you think about that word, what does it mean? Spoiled. Why is it a slang term for something? And really, when you look at it, a spoilage is deprivation. If you have milk and you forget to put it in the refrigerator and you neglect it in some way, it goes bad, it spoils. So if you look at the concept of spoiled with humans, what are we deprived of to create the spoilage, whether it's kids or whatever? But a lot of times what they're spoiled with is they are deprived of the word no. And if you think about it, back to when we were a kid, we learned very quickly no. But what happens when we learn no is it gives us more freedom. It actually gives us more power if we know what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. And we have the internal discipline to understand that and accept influence with kids from our parents. We get a greater wisdom. For example, if we know, no, you can't go play in the street, and parents can trust that, they can give you more freedom to play in the yard. But if they don't know you're not going to run in the in the street, they're not going to let you. So what happens with adults, especially when we have a lot of success and a lot of pride and a lot of arrogance? One of the things that we can do is we can lose humility. And when we lose humility, we can't say no to ourselves, because why should we? Because we're special, we're great, we're wonderful. We deserve all of the accolades and all of the wonderful things that life gives us because we're special. But guess what? Humility will bring us back down. I might be special in one thing, but to be special in that one thing tomorrow, I need new knowledge. I need new understanding. What's new today that wasn't yesterday that I need to know to be better at what I do, right? I mean, doctors, they always go to these conferences and learn the latest skills, and they have to take so many continuing education courses so that they know the latest and the greatest. Okay, so you approach that with humility. How do we do this well in the future? So this idea of humility actually gives us more strength and prevents us from feeling spoiled. Now, the problem is we watch television and we watch a lot of really interesting things, and we will see all of this promotion towards the best and the brightest, right? Right now, as it happens, I'm watching the NCAA basketball tournament is going on right now. And there's only going to be one person or one team that wins that. Same with the women. And I'm enjoying the women's sport too. But the idea at the end of the game, I watch to see if the other team really congratulates the losers. I watch to see if the losers are gracious with the winners and they really feel good for the players that are playing, or is it get that other team off the court so you can talk to me? We have a society that kind of really promotes paying attention to the winners. Don't take the bait. Okay. So let's look at some questions here. Let's see how many I can get through. Number one, okay. Why should I apologize when I'm not the one who started it? Okay, well, guess what? We're talking scorekeeping there, right? So one of the things that you want to do is that conditional humility. I didn't do it wrong, but let me hear what your way of thinking is on that. Okay, so it sounds like we didn't do this well. Notice it isn't me or you, it's we didn't do this well. Wonder what went wrong. Let's talk about what went wrong so next time we can make plans so that it doesn't happen like that. Okay, so that's approaching it with humility. I'm the injured party, right? Might require some soothing from your partner, but certainly going forward, calling somebody out and making them feel bad and wrong probably isn't the best policy on that, right? Okay, so next, every time we argue, my partner says, I'm defensive. I'm just trying to explain myself. Well, okay, so back to humility and how to talk in a good way. We've got to watch this idea that if somebody sees you as defensive, that's a defensive horseman. The antidote to defensiveness is taking responsibility for your part in whatever's going wrong. So the humility is like, well, why do you see this in that way? Right? So you've got to be curious. But the other side of it is there is something to be said for what we call non-defensive responding. That's kind of gentle explaining, giving more information. But at the end of giving more information, the goal should be, so now that we understand that better, let's talk about moving towards resolving the problem together and not about winning and losing or who's right and who's wrong, right? Okay. So next, whenever we argue, I get annoyed when I'm explaining myself and my partner wants to keep interrupting me and they won't let me keep talking. That really annoys me. Okay. Well, one of the things that I'm hearing there potentially is that, it's very important for us to get our message across to somebody, and that is, but it's also very important to stop and get the message back. So that's how I see it. Tell me how you see it, right? Because if the goal is to tell them what it is, and I'm telling them what it is because I know and they don't, well, now that's going to be criticism. See, you don't know what you're doing, which is a horseman, and defending why I think what I think to the exclusion of somebody else's opinion probably won't help either. So one of the things we want to do there is We want to slow down and say enough that they get a concise message, but then immediately turn it over. And you can say little things that bit it back to the other person. It's like, well, that's how I see it, but I'm really curious how you see it. What do you think about what I said, and what's your opinion? Because that what's your opinion means I really want to know your opinion. And the other thing it means is I don't have a monopoly on what the reality is. So I need to know your way of doing it. So when we have these kind of arguments or issues, especially when we can get that upset that we really just have to stay on our own topic, one of the things we may want to do is just settle down. Go back to my flooding video and really look at that and say, maybe I'm too upset to really have this conversation right now. I think my brain's shutting off. So let me go settle down, come back, repair. And then when we're both more calm, let's see what we can do about making that better. Okay. So my partner never admits they're wrong. It's exhausting. All right. Well, so one of the things that you notice there is the never. Okay. So when we're talking, I always want to say and encourage you, watch the always or nevers, because chances are there's a criticism in it. And again, criticism is, not good. We need to approach that with gentle startup. So a good way of saying that back, rather than you never admit you're wrong. One of the things that you might say is, hey, when we're talking, one of the things that I notice is that sometimes I'm right and wrong, and usually that's true of the other person I'm talking about. So it really kind of frustrates me when we get stuck in this. So one of the things that might work better for me is if we both talk about where we see we could do better and where we see we've not done so good. So in that case, that would be the antidote for defensiveness, which is take responsibility for the part of it that's ours. Now, the other thing we can look at is to be curious. If I can never admit I'm wrong, what's going on inside me that makes me think I need to be that way? Okay, I need to be that way. So that's when you want to join together with your partner, because that I notice that happens a lot of times when people use a lot of horsemen. Because what happens is when we show contempt and criticism and defensiveness and we just ignore our partner, it leads to drift away from our partner. It leads to feeling like we're less friends in the world. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So that's the other thing I would look at, is why is a person really needing to defend where that is? The other thing too is, if it is true, well, we're back to my show today. That's humility. It's not just your humility, it's everybody saying, hey, how do we be humble together? And what's your version of humility? What's mine? And how do we make that in a way that just makes us feel better and safer? Okay, let me look at my time. I'm going to try to get this one done quick. If my partner, let's see, here it goes. If my partner would just listen to me, her life would be easier. I get resigned to letting her make her own wrong choices and deal with the consequences. How can I make her listen better? Okay. Well, so one of the things I'm noticing here is, remember, always seek to understand before you seek to fix. So one of the things I'm wondering in this particular example is, if I'm hearing something and just imparting advice to that person, oh, well, what you want to do is this. Well, part of what happens with that is sometimes when people talk to us, they aren't really interested in solving anything. They're just interested in you listening and maybe giving their pain to you because they're hurting and you're important to them and you love them and you care about them, and they want to bring something that's painful to you because of that relationship. So they're not necessarily really looking for an answer. They're looking for comfort and relief. So again, try to understand their point of view with empathy before you get to a point where you need to give them advice. The other thing too is wait for people to ask you what your opinion is before you necessarily go right there. So this is a good mailbag. I like some of the things that we talked about. It encourages us to remember the horsemen. Let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to give you some real practical tips about alerting yourself to when you have to have humility. So we'll talk to you right after break. We'll see you then.
Master of words, powerful player, What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Okay, we're back. And my third segment is kind of my fave in that this is where we have practical tips, all of us, on, how to do better with regard to our relationships. And today we're talking about humility and how to use humility to make our relationships not only even closer, but to actually help us be better people. Before I do that, I do want to go ahead and put up my information. If you want to contact me, I love it because I get some good feedback. I get some good mailbag questions. So I like to put this up, but if you're noticing we tape this, so if you're going to go back and watch this with your partner, especially for the fourth segment, you'll be able to stop this and get all the information that you need in order to let me know what you would like me to hear. And again, I always seek to understand what's going on in my audience. So please, if you don't mind, I love the feedback. So we're going to talk about the actual third segment. Now, again, the title of our show today is Humility, the Secret Strength Behind Great Relationships. And the first thing I want to say is kind of what I talked about last week with reciprocity, which is it starts with you. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is take a breath and slow yourself down. Okay. Because one of the things that you're inviting here is you're inviting critique. Now, I never want you to invite criticism, but critique. How do you come across? When I do my TV show, I like to have people who really know television to say, Don, this is what I think you're doing right. This is what you could improve on. Always love that, because it helps me do better at what I do. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is say it starts with you. So first thing you want to do with this is, can you sit down with yourself and come up with 10 things you're really poor with? 10. Wow. 10 things you really don't do so well at. For me, like I said, I don't really do so well at running anymore. I really don't. Wish I did. It's kind of humbling because one of the main ways I used to manage my stress is to get out and really, go out and do a 5-mile run or something. Really, really enjoyed it. So when you take that away and you get older, it invites weight gain, right? Which is also humbling. So, get 10 things that you kind of wish you could do better about. Now, at the end of this, on the fourth part of our show, I'm going to give you major life areas. So you have categories that you can look at where your strengths and weaknesses are. Okay. Now, let me ask you another question. Could you sit down with a trusted friend and really listen to that constructive criticism? Hey, Don, you do this pretty well and you do that pretty well, but boy, this one, I think you better watch because it affects you. Or, hey, Don, we were at a party and I noticed you were talking about this or that, and I think you put some people off. I don't know that you were aware of it. Those are great things to know, right? Okay. So the other thing is, if you could sit down with somebody that give you those constructive things, could you then go back and silently reflect on what you know and what you don't know, right? So that's important. What do I know about the situation? What do I not know? I like to start there with most things. What am I aware of? What am I not aware of? It's very, very important. Can you do it? Because one of the things you want to do is check. What if they give you some feedback and you get really defensive? Maybe you don't want to talk to them because they gave you some criticism that you thought when it was just constructive for you, right? So very important, very important. How do you take this in is a good way to check your pride, and it's a good way to check your humility. Okay. I remember when I was 28, I had a really, really, really good clinician supervisor at the Jewish Family Service. Still indebted to him. I'm sure he's gone now, but yeah, great man. But he had an adage. He says, "You can close your eyes to reality, but you can't close your eyes to the memories." Think about in your life, back to humility, when maybe you did something, maybe something happened, and it cost you. Maybe it cost you friendships. Maybe some people it cost you a job. Maybe with some people you broke up with somebody. I don't know. But, can you look at yourself with that and notice what I'm saying? Because you can close your eyes to why that happened and get really defensive and get really arrogant and puff your chest out. But if you do, you might be at risk for continuing to repeat the cycle. And then you have more memories that you don't want, right? Because that's what we're interested in right now in the here and now. What we want to do is we want to say, going in the future, right? How do we stop all of that? Okay. So, anyway, I decided to look up some words for you. The first one is definition of humility: the accurate, unassuming assessment of one's own abilities, limitations, and worth. Okay, so unassuming assessment, just honest assessment of one's own abilities, limitations, and worth. Very good. Characterized by freedom of arrogance and focus on others, not ourselves. Right, right. So I looked up a word once in the Yiddish, which was a putz. Somebody's a putz. So I don't know what that is. I wonder what it is. And it says kind of a worthless person. It's the expression of that. Now, I don't ever want to be seen as somebody who is worthless. In biblical words, if somebody is without love, anything they do collapses around them, right? So we want to be able to look at the world with humility, without arrogance, and to be objective in what we need to correct. I like to use the analogy of being on a bike trail. What you want to do is constantly make adjustments on that bike trail. You want to watch branches, you want to duck when you're under a low tree branch, you want to avoid puddles. But the big thing you don't want to do is go off the bike trail, because the minute you start going off, you can wreck your bike. You can fall off, you can fall down the hill. You don't want to do that. So what you have to do is constantly make corrections. And that's true in life. So one of the ways we do that to stay on the bike trail with us is we are humble, right? We are humble. And I often say humble and grateful, meaning be aware of what's happening in our world that's really wonderful and grace, and we really appreciate it. We get it, and we appreciate it. So humble is having or showing a modest estimate of one's value and importance. I'm going to say it again. Sometimes people can be really good at something. It doesn't mean they're really good at everything. And sometimes if you watch like news and television and stuff, some people that are really good at something are saying they're really giving you advice on something that they aren't necessarily good at, but they have an opinion about that, right? Well, do they know what they don't know, right? Or are they just talking? Well, you have to assess that. But I don't want you to do that so much today. I want you to assess yourself, right? And then share that with others in a caring, loving way so that they can get better. So, all right. So, what's arrogance? Well, arrogance is a quality of having an exaggerated sense of our own importance or abilities. Okay. So one thing I like to say as an adage is if I had mustard on my face right here, you could see it, I couldn't. You could see it, I couldn't. So one of the things I want to say about that is I need people around me who care about me and love me to say, hey, Don, check the mustard, right? And by the way, to get mustard on our face is human. That's the other thing. It's not a disgrace that happens. Sometimes we eat something and we get something on our face, right? Same with life. Sometimes we think we know something and we don't, and we can be embarrassed. But at the same time, correct it. Make that adjustment on the bike trail with humility. Yeah, because you get to be able to do well, and you get to be able to make mistakes like everybody else on the planet. And when people don't want to let you make mistakes or feel like that, oh, you made a mistake, you weren't perfect. Well, I don't know. That sounds like criticism to me. And what I want to say is, beyond that wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself because you're going to go through the day and you're going to make mistakes. And you know what else? People are going to also make mistakes. Well, that's all right. You want to have grace with them, you know. Sometime I remember a long time ago, but I'd go in for a physical, and when the doctor needed to give me my medicine prescriptions, I go to the doctor or I go to the pharmacist and they forgot to write the script. Oh, they made a mistake. So what? So I call back and say, hey, I still need that. And they said, oh, goodness, we didn't get that over there for you. That's okay. Right. Because I want people to have grace with me too. So we get to all be in that group of people that we can do our best but make mistakes. So when you get into the idea of arrogance, it's having an exaggerated sense of our own worth and self-appointment. And then what happens is we don't have to worry about having mustard on our face because we are different. Be careful with that one. Okay. Point. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, right? And these strengths and weaknesses can and will change over time. So life by its very nature engages in something called entropy, this natural, state of going into lesser or degrading or deteriorating, right? Those will humble you. I'm older now. I get to see more of them. So there is strength in receiving that humility. There's really danger in ignoring it. Somebody once told me, and I really like this. They said, Don, you're young when you exercise to improve. So let's say I'm running a race and I exercise and I run a race faster. They said, you're aging when you do it to lose it slower. So in other words, I'm not going to make my personal best like I did when I was younger, but maybe if I really exercise and stuff, I won't lose as much time as fast. And then, you're my age when you do this stuff to stay healthy and stay alert and not lose things, right? Like I said, I'm working like crazy to keep my knees really good, and I'm happy to say they're wonderful. They don't hurt. I can do a ton of things. You'd never know that I had knee issues, but I don't run anymore to protect that. So that's a different stage of life too. That's humility. That's being humble with that. Okay, so by not being humble, we can deprive ourselves of the word no. And that's very important. Like I said, when kids are young, they learn no and they have a greater sense of freedom, right? So when we hear no, Don, you can't run anymore, it gives me a better freedom to continue to exercise and maintain my body in a better way. When we say no to other things, it may make us more alert. I've often said, I tell you, if I get into my 70s, let's say, and I drink even a little bit of alcohol and it makes me fuzzy, thank goodness my memory's sharp. But let's say all of a sudden I start doing that and I start being forgetful. I'm not drinking anymore. It's going to be like my knees. And part of me is like, oh boy, but I enjoyed a glass of wine with dinner sometime. But again, you want to make sure that you can stay as healthy and do it as long as you can. But if you don't let yourself hear no, then you're at risk for other things, right? So let me look at my time. Drift warnings. The bad and the ugly of humility is it can lead to drift. And when you drift away from your connected people, what happens is many times as a symptom, people look to other things for temporary gain. It's the old love is a pie versus love is a blanket I talked about. So now we're not naturally warming each other with unconditional love. So what we're doing is we're making sure we get our dopamine hits in other ways. Well, how do you do that? Well, too much time on the phone, too much alcohol, comparison with what the other people have and you don't. All of those little dopamine hits that work temporarily, but they really don't give us the joy and the love and the comfort of that unconditional love that I'm suggesting you try to get by listening to my show and by doing some of the things that what I just call our best practices. Okay. So we don't want to turn away from our people. We don't want to win and be right, but lose relationships, right? That's bad. So when we stop turning towards each other through arrogance, we run the risk of turning somewhere else. And I don't recommend it because those things are fleeting. Okay. So let's see what other kind of things I want to say before we get into our fourth episode. Be careful not to become seduced by our own success or need for success, beyond a wholesome discipline. I'm going to talk to you about major life areas in our last segment. I want you to pay attention to them because you got to balance those. You've got to make sure all of those are being taken care of, right? And if we don't know what we don't know, or we don't see what we don't see, we could be seduced into justifying our own world for good, for bad, and for everything else, right? So we want to do that. And we already live in a world that promotes flattery and false praise and false pride and encourages our own sense of self-importance. It gets us to buy stuff. So be very, very, very careful. All right. So we're going to break, come back, and I'm going to give us a fun thing we're all going to do for the week. So we'll see you shortly.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Okay, well, this is our fourth segment. This is the one where I invite you to go back and watch a show with someone you love and care about, and then we can all do this fun exercise. Okay, so here it goes. This is my humility exercise I came up with. Before I do that, I need to give you 8 major life areas. These areas, if you have problems in one of them, it can shut down the show for you. If you're really sick with the flu, that's the health one. You're not doing much anything else but getting better from the flu, right? So what I'm going to do is give you these 8 in the order I want them. So the first one is your spiritual life. Spiritual life could be, Passover or going to Easter, but it could also be we're in the spring and just going outside and feeling the spring breeze and the sunshine. That could be spiritual. Health is your body. How you doing with your health? Are you going to the doctor? Are you going to the dentist? Those kind of things. The next one is what we talk about, your love life. And the connections you have with your primary partner. But the next one is your family life. This could be the family in your house with your kids and your partner, or it could be your family that you grew up in, right? You can do those. So family life. The next one's your social life. Who's your buds? Who do you hang around with? Who do you see? Not only individually, but maybe you have couples friends. So that's that one. The next one I put together with the other one is job and money. You know, your money's your engine. But again, if you're having money woes, you can see how that's going to shut down these 8 major life areas. So job and money. And then the last one is activities and fun. What do you do to just enjoy your life and go out and see amazing things and do the things you all like to do? So real quick, spiritual health, love life, family life, social life, job and money, and activities and fun. So keep that in mind when we do our exercise. Okay, here we go. What I want you to do is prepare to sit down with your person and have the following conversation. First, make a list of 3 things you do really well. Really well. Next, make a list of 5 things that you're really not good at. And be honest, right? The next thing is make a list of 2 things that you used to really do well, but you've lost over time. Okay, I just mentioned my knees, right? Hint, reference all the major life areas I just gave you to pick some of these. Okay, just have fun with it. So now you've got your list. Your partner has the same list. Sit down with your partner and exchange lists, right? Show the list. Tell your partner 2 things that make them unconditionally lovable to you. You know, just because they are who they are, not because they have great hair or not because they have, a wonderful job. This is things about them that are unique to them. Okay. So then what you want to do is list 2 things to your partner that you think really gets in their way. You know, some of these things that, causes them problems. Okay. So now that you've got this, go out next week and gently notice some of the things you wish you could do better and report to your partner on it. Hey, you know what? I just noticed that I do this and that seems annoying to you. Boy, I want to think about that. I want to be humble with that because I don't like to do things that make people feel annoying. Do it as a mutual goal. Do not do it as criticism. You're using the 4 horsemen on this. It'll knock the whole exercise out. So you're finding those ways to express gratitude to your partner just because they're in your life. Always seek to understand before you seek to fix, and talk to your partner about strengths and weaknesses. If they ask you, you might give them information that you feel like would be good wisdom or advice, but go to understand before you seek to fix. Okay, now, really cool. You've done this. Everything's all done. Did any of it make you angry or prideful? First, check to see if you or your partner were using any horsemen, because if that's happening, it's going to get you off the exercise, and it's because of the horsemen. But if it wasn't, this is a good humility check. If I start to feel criticized just because I don't like the fact that they notice something I do, mustard on your face, well, then I want to slow down and say, that's something I want to do better and change. And then you both share the victory together. This is you 2 against the problem. It's not you 2 calling each other out. Remember, both hands open, gentle, loving connection. All right. So have fun with this. Have good holidays, folks. Have a good time with all of your family. I hope you have that happening. Try to reach out to people. Try to make new traditions, right? I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. Thank you so much for coming in to talk with me and sharing my hour with me. I look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday, 1:00 Eastern time. And all of you, again, have a really wonderful, blessed holiday, or just enjoy your family or whatever you're going to be doing for the weekend. Take care.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.